the questions that we get asked a lot is, what is the nitrogen value of this year's pea crop to next year's crop? So the scientist in me cannot first talk about the system and why we talk about a nitrogen benefit following peas. So there's nitrogen in the atmosphere, lots of it, and there is air in soil. So all through the soil there's pores, and we actually get air in the soil, and sometimes we don't always think about that, which means the air in the soil also contains nitrogen. Now, plants, every plant needs nitrogen to grow. It's a macronutrient, just like our human bodies have certain macronutrient needs to grow and flourish and be vital. But plants can only take up certain kinds of nitrogen. They have a really unique strategy for how to make sure that they get that macronutrient of nitrogen. And what they've done is they form a special relationship with a microbiological creature called a rhizobia. This rhizobia can actually ingest the nitrogen that's in the soil air and turn it into a plant available form. This little guy needs a place to set up shop before they can actually start this process. And legume plants say, hey, you know what? We're gonna give you a home if you'll give us some of that nitrogen. And so they have this symbiotic relationship where the rhizobia fix the nitrogen in the atmosphere or in the soil air and pass it on to the plant to meet its macronutrient needs. And the plant says, you know what, I'm gonna give you some carbohydrates or some sugars to help support your growth and reproduction. So it's a really great win-win situation. To grow a 50 bushel pea crop, we need about 150 pounds of nitrogen. So that's actually pretty phenomenal to think that all of that can come from this relationship with rhizobia. And some of that nitrogen, some of that 150 pounds, gets taken out in the seed that we harvest. Some of it is leached into the soil just through the roots, and the rest of it is sitting in this residue. And as it breaks down over time, it then can become available to the subsequent crops. Now, we love to put numbers on things. And one of the really good economical reasons to grow pulse crop is because you can save money on buying fertilizer in the year following. And so everybody wants to know how many pounds of nitrogen. And just like everything in nature, it's a bit complicated because plants just can't take up this. It has to go through microbial degradation, which then changes it from a biological form into an inorganic form of nitrogen that plants can take up. And all of that depends on soil temperature, the amount of moisture in the soil. Does this residue sit on top or is it incorporated? And all of that impacts the amount of time before the nitrogen is released to the following crop. But if you put me up against a wall and said, Jen, I need a number. For about a 50 bushel crop of peas, you can count on, give or take, about 30 pounds of nitrogen per acre to the crop following from peas. It's a little bit of a different story. Faba beans is going to be more, lentils probably a little less. But that's basically the story about the nitrogen benefit following a pulse crop. One thing that we can't quite put our finger on is there seems to be more. There's something more. It's not just the nitrogen that benefits the crop following, and science hasn't quite figured out that complete picture. My PhD supervisor, Dr. Jane King, used to call it the legume magic. So for those of you who are considering growing a pulse crop, just kind of keep that tucked in the back of your mind. It's not only a nitrogen benefit, there's some sort of magic that happens in the year following a pulse.